Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Lauren Fisher. I am the host of Wellness Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in today. I am psychologist and wellness chair of the Visit Delray Business Association. And the Wellness District is a community of health, wellness, and fitness providers in the area. So each week we feature someone new. And tonight I'm proud to say, we have my business partner, Dr. Eleni Busalis, here to talk to us about her new podcast, Why Does This Keep Happening to Me? And all about breaking patterns of behavior. So we'll get to her in a little bit. But our hope is to bring you some useful information that can be helpful in your life. So before we do that, we're just going to go into a little bit of Delray news. So first, I'd like to tell you about the candy cane bar crawl that is happening this Saturday. Before you get horrified at the fact that we're having a bar crawl, I'd like to let you know that it's pandemic adapted. We have this amazing tradition that we do every single year in which we have a bar crawl. It's really a celebration of community where we come together, drink in a very positive way, and dress up and raise tons of money for charity. It's a very fun holiday tradition here, and we're all, kind of sad about missing it this year, although we understand why. But, we realized that we could still keep the spirit going by having this bar crawl to go. So all the 15 restaurants in Delray, we even have some new ones. They are all featuring this Saturday, one drink special and one food special to go. And there's a heck of a lineup. And so you can order all your to go, do your curbside pickup, take a couple of different samples home, and have it that night. Or maybe you want to buy a package and give it to, a friend as a surprise. But I will say, if you register on visitdelray.com, you register and you purchase at least one drink, you'll be eligible for the grand prize raffle and several giveaways. Also, we're going to have 250 swag bags, which I'm going to say are pretty cool. We have a cup, candy, some Christmas swag, but also some goodies from our local businesses. So our big purpose here is to really support our restaurants. It's been a tough year for them, as it's been for many businesses. So this would be a fun, simple way to just drive in some business for them that day. And also our swag bags and everything else, there's going to be items there that we've purchased from local businesses just to help everybody stay afloat. So again, visit delray.com. And if you do end up registering, you will see me on Facebook Live announcing some of the winners and things. Okay. Moving on, we've also got a donation drive for Carpenter Shelter. This is going on from December 6th to the 25th. And Carpenter Shelter is an organization here in Alexandria that helps the homelessness and transitional housing and many other things. They have a list of items that they are asking the community for. And that includes lotions, deodorant, body wash, shampoo, and conditioner. There are several drop-off points, and they are the same as what we did for the Alive donations last month. So that is at Lena's, the Dog Store, Waxon City, and Delray Psych and Wellness. But you can find all the information on visitdelray.com. All right, great. So with that said, I'd like to introduce to you my business partner and good friend, Dr. Eleni Busalis. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Dr. Busalis has been a psychologist for over, I believe, 15 years now. She's a psychotherapist who specializes in anxiety, depression, and trauma. She also is a hypnotherapist and a holistic therapist. And we have known each other for quite a bit. So I thought maybe we just let people know a little bit about our story before we dig into your podcast.
So our story, how we met or how we started our practice, we have a long history.
We'll give them a Cliff Notes version, but how about how we met?
Yeah, so we met in a private practice after grad school over, I guess that was like 12, 13 years ago maybe. And we decided to start our own practice very apprehensively and scared, but we did it, and we ended up in Delray eventually. And it's been a trip. It's been great. And maybe like 2 years ago, we started Delray Psych and Wellness, and we've been growing since then.
You are right. She likes to leave out the part that we worked for a boss initially who had an Escalade with a license plate for a narcissistic personality disorder, the code for it on his plate. Someone who told us that we would never succeed in business. And, that's kind of like exactly what at least I need. So both of us back then, did get out. But what's interesting is that we just interwove. We didn't have our practices together, but we worked alongside each other for years and had lots of ideas. So when this group practice kind of came across our path, we like to say divine intervention. It's been a gift. And I say that because I've known you for so long. So I know for as long as I've known you, you've said, I want a radio show. I want a radio show. And little did we know that we're kind of source, like Alini and I were writing, I always say writing paper notes. And then one of our interns was like, nobody does that anymore. It's all like electronic. And we're like, what? So I feel like a few years ago when someone's like, you should probably do a podcast instead of a radio show, because that's like the cool thing. You remember we were like, what's a podcast?
Yeah, I know. Like we just started doing electronic medical records maybe 2.5 years ago, and we're like, oh, what is that? Come out of the dark ages. Yeah.
Well, for as long as I know, you've been talking about a podcast, and here you are, and I'm so proud of you. You launched your podcast this past fall, so just 2 months ago. So please tell us a little bit about your podcast, the name of it, and your inspiration behind it.
So it's called Why Does This Keep Happening to Me? And my inspiration was that after thousands of hours doing psychotherapy, I started hearing the same statement over and over again. So no matter what people were talking about, whether it was family conflict or career change or relationship problems, dating issues, it was always, why does this keep happening to me? And so I started to realize that people kept feeling that things were happening to them. But as an outsider and as a psychotherapist, I was seeing that things weren't actually happening to them. They were choosing them. And that happens mostly on a subconscious level. And that's why psychotherapy is so helpful, because I could see it as an outsider, but we can't see that part of ourselves without someone else that's unbiased seeing it for us and noticing it for us. So that's where my inspiration was. I was thinking, I keep hearing these stories that I know could help someone else, and if only these stories can be shared on a radio show or a talk show or a podcast, that understanding that these things are not actually happening to you could be enlightening and helpful for people.
Yeah. And I like what you said, like stories are a great way. Like people heal people. So I love that this is another way in which you're really trying to help spread the word about understanding ourselves better and changing behavior. Because that actual phrase, why does this keep happening to me, is something I hear a lot with my clients, and you too. So tell me a little bit about what you notice, like, in what ways, like, where does that show up in people's lives? Where do you hear that said?
Yeah, I think it probably happens mostly in relationships. And people will say, let's say like a dating relationship. Oh, well, why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep ending up with these jerks? Or why do I keep ending up in these toxic relationships? Or at work, why do I keep getting passed up for that promotion? Or in my family, why do I keep being bullied around, being the scapegoat of the family? And so, noticing how people are, I always tell people that you teach others how to treat you. And people take verbal and nonverbal cues from how you allow them to treat you. And we're not aware of that because it's become so normal for each of us, how we have learned and observed how to interact with others from our upbringing, from our family of origin, from our environment. And so when that becomes your norm, then that's what you know. And when you don't know any different, then you don't know that you could have a different experience if you do things differently. So that has really been what has driven this for me, is to give people that insight to understand where they learned to behave in certain ways, how they learned to feel around family members, for example, growing up. So if you learned to feel a certain way, to feel dismissed, to feel invisible, to feel like your opinion is not as important as someone else's, then that relational pattern will most of the time get replicated in your adult relationships, with, unbeknownst to you, that you have actually chosen the perfect individuals and the perfect situations to continue reenacting that relationship dynamic over and over again in your life.
Yeah, and I know that there's definitely going to be exceptions, and everyone needs to understand that, like, yeah, sometimes bad things do happen to people and bad experiences, and they are random occurrences. But for a lot of the everyday things that you're mentioning, a lot of patterns or things are happening based on what we're putting out in the world, right, and the way that we're thinking. And are you saying that it does go back to childhood a lot?
I think most of the time it does. Yeah, I mean, we have these conversations all the time about nature versus nurture, and of course our genetics come into play, but I have always believed that our environment is more of a influencer than other things. And we don't even know, like I said, we don't know that the analogy I give is like that that air conditioner that's going on in the background that you don't know is on until it turns off. It's just
Mm,
this constant, like, inner dialogue that has become your norm. And it's become so normal, repetitive, and recurrent that you're not even really paying attention to it consciously. It's like this subconscious thing that's happening. And so, again, with this podcast, it's how do we take something that we're not aware of and that we're not conscious of and make it conscious? Because that's really the first step for change, is consciousness.
yeah. And, we chuckle a little bit because, and I know my dad's listening. So, no, we're not blaming our parents for what's happening. But the reality is, right, that we do form beliefs about ourselves and the world, positive or negative, start early on. And so, see that because a lot of times when you're helping people examine their behaviors, they don't realize like how entrenched those patterns are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel like most people like are unconscious of like the patterns they're stuck in?
I think so. I think everyone to some degree has blind spots, right? And that's what we call the shadow parts, is that we have these blind spots that we can't see, much like when we're driving. We have certain blind spots that no matter how we look, we can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are subconscious things that have happened that are stored in that way. And having someone in a passenger seat to point them out sometimes and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, did you notice how you reacted when that happened? Or did you notice that you got really anxious when that person said that? And so there's these kind of reactions we have, or interactions that we create, that we take part in, that we're not aware of, of what's being triggered or what's being
Yeah.
repeated in our life.
Yeah. And so that's the beauty of like, right, having someone else look. But what is interesting with all your the people you're interviewing is that it's one of the big things you're asking everyone. It's sort of like, what's that point in your life where you changed this pattern? Like, what made you change it? So why don't we go ahead and play one of the clips from your audio or your podcast with Devin, who spoke about breaking or cycles of drinking and doing drugs, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Can we get that video clip up, please?
What I've heard this phrase, I don't know where, it's like what you resist persists. So like you said, when it comes up, I used to try to push it away, or I would pray it away. I'd be like, oh, well, I don't want to feel angry. So please like stop me from being angry. You know what I mean? Instead of just saying, okay, well, what is this? Why am I angry?
Yes.
Like what is this speaking to? And so now it's like the discovery. What can the shadow teach me about myself? Instead of trying to get away from it, what exactly what you're pointing to, what burden here, like what do I need to explore here, and what do I need to love up on here? You know what I mean? Like that's the other part of it, is like, this must need some love, this must need some compassion if it keeps coming up in full force, so
yeah, it must need some attention.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, you had said to me once, if you spot it, you got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So tell me about that clip.
So yeah, that was a really great episode when Devin was talking about what you resist persists. And again, it doesn't matter if we're talking about sobriety or if we're talking about toxic relationships or we're talking about anger management. Whatever that thing is that we resist in our life and we are actively trying to push away, persists. And so really it's sitting in it, sitting in the discomfort, sitting and feeling and noticing and being present and mindful of what is showing up for you right now. And so when Devin was saying, what do I need to give love to? What do I need to show compassion towards inside me? And oftentimes people don't take the moment to ask themselves that question. It's like, right now I'm feeling this urge to do this thing. Right now I am feeling a pull to drink, for example. Well, okay, so instead of saying, I got to get rid of that, why not, with all of these different situations we find ourselves in, why not sit and ask yourself with compassion, what is it that I need right now? What is it that's being triggered right now that I need to show love to and compassion for? Because oftentimes we meet some of those thoughts with shaming thoughts or self-critical thoughts or avoidance. I don't want to think that. I don't want to feel that, and that's really, again, going back to subconscious patterns. They're the I don't want to say the cure, but I guess the best thing to do, as Devin was talking about, is to sit in that and feel it and notice it and honor it. And that's where change happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in her, in this episode, like prior to that, and I think what you're hitting on, and like, again, the unconscious, the conscious, like, not recognizing she had a problem, but then when she noticed that some things, like, the impulses, the things you're mentioning, but she would ignore them, right? She'd use the avoidance and those other techniques. But she really, like, when you asked her, like, well, what made you finally change? She said, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like this point there, that like threshold, and I feel that a lot of that happens. I think that's a lot of the reason we see people come in to our offices. They're just like, I'm tired of this, or feeling this way, or being in the same type of relationship. But do you feel, I think we want to probably prevent people from getting to that point too.
Yeah. And that's true. When people come in, I always ask them, why now? Because I know that you've experienced this for a long time. We don't usually get help or want to talk or address something until we've been in it for a while and we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I really like what you said about like leaning into it and breathing it and trying to understand it instead of pushing it away. Because the other thing that Devin hit on was that intuition, that like she had a sense something wasn't right. I mean, I think there's tangible things she could feel, but the way she didn't like her behavior, how she felt like physically. But kind of like, I think she said, like, this isn't the way life's supposed to be. So I think a lot of times we have the sense that things are off, but we, as you said, ignore them, or we don't attend to them.
Yeah, and that's you can call that intuition, you can call it a gut feeling, you can call it discomfort. It's like we are, especially in this area, so busy running all the time and moving and filling every minute up and not sitting still. And it's like that metaphor of, this bucket full of dirt. You can't really see through it till you sit still for a while, and then it falls to the bottom and you can see clearly. And so that's the thing, is that if we can sit still long enough and let everything just settle, then we can be present with ourselves and intuitively ask ourselves, what is going on? What is missing? Why am I in this again? But we don't have the ability to hear that inner voice when we're running and avoiding for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And along the same vein with we talked about relationships, like why does this keep happening to me? Can you give an example of something where someone's like, why do I keep ending up with this kind of guy or dysfunctional partner, shall we? And maybe what you help them realize.
Mm-hmm. I think, oh God, it's like, what's a good example? Because so many, I think probably 90% of the people that come in, right, have something related to that keeps happening. But it's okay. So oftentimes people will say, why do I end up with these people that are really controlling? Okay, like, don't let me be who I am. Don't let me speak my mind, my opinion, very controlling. And it's become a familiar dynamic that gets replicated because that's what they know. And it's kind of like, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. So then you just end up in the same familiar theme. Oh, here he comes again with a different pair of pants on. Here he comes again with a different name, right? And so then when you notice, someone points out, okay, well, you know what? This didn't come from left field. This didn't just pop up, like you say, oh, I don't know how this happened. We go back and we can see that there were very many red flags prior to that. And those red flags were very familiar. And oftentimes those little red flags aren't only familiar in your adult relationships, but they can be, they're familiar from your, childhood relationships. So then it becomes this, going from this conscious awareness of, oh yeah, this feels the same to me. We get stuck more cognitively where we don't think it's the same type of person. But when we go to the feeling, we notice it feels the same. So that's what we're replicating, right? We're replicating the feeling. We're not necessarily from the outside, does it look like we're replicating it? So once people notice, then, I'm like, okay, so that feels the same. So then the next time around you meet someone and they say, they come in and they say, I met someone, but I don't know, it's kind of like boring, or it's kind of not something I'm used to, or I'm uncomfortable. So that's something to examine. It's like, well, why are you uncomfortable? Are you uncomfortable because it's different? Or are you uncomfortable because, there's something wrong in the situation? But it's like, again, sitting still long enough to allow your inner voice and your intuition to speak to you and to let you know if this is another familiar pattern you're repeating, or if you're breaking it, if you're on the way to breaking a pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. Because something that you and I talked about, but like why people get stuck is sometimes because they feel like things are happening to them. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I don't want to say it's always in the camp, but this could be the camp of the victim. Right? So when people think that everything's happening to them or they're externalizing blame, why is that problematic?
So, when you're externalizing blame, that takes all your power and control away, right? If this thing is happening to you, then you have no control or power in the situation. And so that's where, if we can shift the view from this is happening to me to I am choosing this, that gives you more of a sense of control and agency in your life. And these things that keep happening, there's many contributors. Some of them have to be, like I said, recreating familiar feelings. Some of them are driven by our thoughts that are, most of our thoughts every day are just recycled thoughts. They're the same thoughts we have day after day. And we don't realize that our thoughts often dictate our behaviors and our choices. So if your thought is that, people are unkind, then you will tend to subconsciously attend to people that are unkind. You will tend to subconsciously be in relationships with people that are unkind, because that has become your truth. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, it's like, how do we realize like how we're contributing to this feeling of victimization where things are happening out of our control?
Yeah, and I think you hit the head on. Like, we give our power away, right? And that's scary to have no power, but we realize like we always have power. We always have some power in the way that, and choices of what you said, and the way that we choose to go about things. And while we can't always prevent things from happening, let's say like we're talking about the relationships, like, why do I keep meeting the guy that is a narcissist and taking care of me, right? And like you said, when you step back and you take a look and examine, right, you're going to realize that there's likely some things that you're allowing happening or seeing the red flags, right? So when you choose to change and go about it in a different way, will it guarantee it won't happen? No, but it's definitely going to reduce the risk of that happening and increase your odds of having a different outcome. So, I think it's realizing that, number one, like responsibility can fall within you, even if it's unintentional, internally, and that like, that you have choices to make, right?
Yeah, and that you have a choice that you can just say, no, I'm not going to engage in this anymore.
Yeah. Or like even simply when you go through something that's like really difficult, like you even just ask yourself, like, what am I learning from this?
Yes, that's a big one. It's like whenever something happens, it's like, what have I learned from this? Why did this happen? What was here to teach me? And it's a learning, everything is learning, but it's not if we just keep having the same lesson repeated. Then we're not learning. Then we're just kind of like regurgitating.
Totally. Do you want to play that other clip?
Sure. The drama queens. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, the drama queen.
Yeah, that one was a fun one.
One of my teachers who like practices, karmic energy, she said like good things happen to good people. And she says it's not just good things, it's good energy.
Right. Yeah. That's
You
true.
The energy that you're putting out is the energy that you're going to get back.
Yes. And if the energy you're putting out is, chaotic, that's right. The energy you're going to get back. And that goes back to what you were saying when you sat still and you were, just not moving, and you're just reflecting, then you start to attract more of that.
Yep.
That peace, that quiet, that contentment, as opposed to the chaos.
Yeah. Oh, perfectly stated. Yes.
Out that corrupts,
Okay.
Yeah. So that was how Danielle and I were talking about being recovered drama queens. And I am a self-proclaimed recovered drama queen. and so is she.
Which I feel like everyone should tune in, because you, to me, I've never experienced any drama with you in 15 years. So it's hard to imagine. But I guess because you broke the pattern, right? So
yeah, people that knew me then, it was like Danielle and I were talking about on this podcast, is like, why does this drama follow me everywhere? She was talking about, how have I lost 3 apartments in a year? How have I, and me, how did I end up in this crazy situation? And just there is a part like when Danielle was saying, when you put out chaos, the energy of chaos and the expectation of chaos, you just get more of it, and it just feeds itself.
Yeah. So let's let's tie this in a little bit. I see a correlation to one of the questions. Let me see if you agree. We have a question that said, I'm curious how you view the incorporation of self-esteem with the ability to make mindful decisions and break patterns.
How do you incorporate self-esteem? So I think when sometimes when people ask me, they say, well, so what do I do? How do I change this? Just on a brief response. And what I say is that every single choice you make every second of the day, whether it's a thought, whether it's something you watched or read or said, is moving you in a direction. So is this choice that you are making to engage with this person, to have an argument with this person, to allow this person to be in your life and speak to you the way they speak to you, are these choices moving you in the direction of love for yourself, or in the other direction? If you're trying to build your self-esteem, your feelings of self-confidence, then every choice you're making is moving you either in that direction or away from it. And that's like a very simple way, I think. I talk a lot about boundaries, and boundaries meaning that an emotional boundary is one where you protect your emotional well-being. And so that means that you don't pick up other people's stuff that they're throwing at you, blaming you for their choices, shaming you, telling you how you should feel or how you should act. These are things that we need to protect. We need to protect our emotions. We need to protect our inner world. We need to protect all of that. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but it's just that every moment is a choice.
Yeah. And, I think when you come back to you want to break this pattern, actually breaking, I think what you said is really important. And, you're moving toward or away from your goal. And what I think people forget is compassion for themselves and patience. We often, when we try to break behavior, I say anytime you try something, even if it's not successful, I'm like, that's a win. And we need to evaluate process over outcome. Because when our practice is good, and we practice of the practice and keep practicing, we'll eventually get to where we want. But a lot of times everybody wants change quick. And I think that that's where it undermines our belief in our abilities to actually affect change. And I mean, I'll just use weight loss. That's a big one for people, right? That they're like, I'm going to start eating healthy. And then they eat healthy, let's say, 13 out of the 17 meals. And they're like, but I failed because I didn't do all 17. I'm like, but you made 17 meal choices that were healthy, health promoting behaviors that are pushing you toward your goal. So I think, and I'm not entirely sure if we're not answering your question, Amy, let us know. But, I think that, ability to view yourself as a catalyst in your process is so important, because when we realize we can affect change, no matter how small it is, it's kind of like a superpower. And you and I have both seen people come in at age 30, 40, 50, and they're like, well, this is how I am. And I'm like, who told you that? They're like, I've been depressed for 30 years. Someone told me I'm depressed. I'll always be depressed. I'm like, really? So
yeah, that became your truth.
Yeah, exactly. It's really important for us.
That became a story.
Your brain can change. And we're here to help.
Yes. And, going along with what you said, not only did that become your story and it became your truth at some point, but also going back to the self-esteem question, how are you speaking to yourself? And I ask people, when you speak to yourself, do you speak that way to others? We are so much kinder sometimes to other people than we are to ourselves. People are like, oh no, I call myself stupid all day. I'm like, oh, of course you did that. That was idiotic. And I'm like, but would you say that to your son or to your, your boss? Would you just walk around talking like that to people? And then that hits them is like, yeah, I'm not that nice to myself. Right.
Right. Yeah. be a good mentor or a bad mentor, right? So yeah, love, support, and encouragement. And what are we learning, right? That's where our growth happens, right? That examination of learning, understanding, and compassion. So anyway, I'm sure we could talk hours about this. Before we go into our conclusion of our holiday breaking patterns for the holidays, that might be helpful. If there's like one takeaway, you said so many great things. If there's like one takeaway you'd want people to know, what would it be from your podcast?
I would say if you want to do something, if you want something different to happen, then do something different. And I think the way that normally happens is you have to sit with discomfort and you have to sit with things that are unfamiliar and look at them with curiosity. And that, I think if we all did that, we just sat with things that are unfamiliar and uncomfortable, that's where the growth happens.
Yes. Awesome. Well said. So, you and I were talking about the holidays, and we hear some common patterns of behavior happen for ourselves, for others. And one of them is people pleasing. There's a lot of people that fall into people pleasing behaviors. And, at the expense of like, I think, right, making others happy. I don't want to hear Aunt Gigi say this, or I don't, want to have to feel guilty. I don't want to deal with the conflict. So I'm just going to go do this, even though I really don't want to spend time with those people. So changing your people pleasing patterns is important because it's honoring you, but it's especially important this year because what I'm hearing a lot of in the era of COVID and health, we are realizing and seeing everybody has different opinions on the way they're viewing the pandemic and their risk levels and the way they want to, handle their own safety. And there's a lot of people within families that are feeling different. So people are getting shamed or they're getting bullied or they're being dismissed. And one of my recommendations for you all would be to act in accordance with your values, to honor yourself and your health and safety. So it's a great time to advocate and say no and put the boundaries down, regardless of what the, kickback's going to be. At the end of the day, you're going to feel good because, well, you're acting in accordance again with your values, but you're also, not going to get sick if, you are actually truly going to a high risk situation. Do you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes people avoid saying no to avoid discomfort, going back to what we were talking about. And what I always say is that, yeah, okay, you're going to avoid discomfort in that situation, but then that will create anxiety, it'll create depression, it'll create poor self-esteem. And so being true to yourself, and if you want to say no, say no. It's not your job to protect other people's feelings. Your truth, I'm not comfortable with that, that gathering. I'm not comfortable being in that gathering. Somehow people equate with, oh, that's going to make them unhappy. So I'm just going to say yes. So I'm going to sacrifice my happiness, health, and contentment to not hurt their feelings. So see, there's another choice. You've just chosen someone else's happiness over your own.
Right.
For fear of discomfort. So it's like, I would say simply, don't do things out of obligation. If you don't want to do something, don't do it, and don't worry about hurting their feelings. That's not your job.
Yeah, don't do it and don't defend it. Because someone just asked, what's a good way to start setting boundaries with crazy family members? And honestly, we want to do a whole episode about this because there's so many different scenarios that could be happening. And each one of them are challenging depending on who the person's with. But, I think that people sometimes, the first part is just stepping into the I'm not comfortable, or this is what I've chosen for myself. And not getting pulled into defending it or rationalizing or proving it. And I find a simple way to say is just hey, let's just use the COVID. we're not coming to visit you because we are concerned about the virus. And they're like, whatever, this overblown, it's a conspiracy. Instead of like engaging with them, just say, hey, well, you know what, you and I may think differently, but this is how I think. And, I'd either like you just to respect the way I think, or just let's just agree we feel differently on it. This is what I'm going to do. Like, stand within your truth, but don't defend or argue.
Yeah, disengage. I always tell people disengage from the argument, because it's like this whirlwind. That's another, metaphor with these people. It's like they're a little hurricane and they want to suck you into it. So just stay in the periphery and don't get sucked into the, engagement of defending yourself, because you don't have to.
Well, and also, we're talking about identifying our patterns, right? So this might be like you stepping up, but you've got to also realize that everyone else around you is acting out unconscious patterns. So sometimes, like, family members aren't intentionally trying to drive you nuts, but they just happen to be, right, the know-it-all, or the, the anxious controller, whatever it may be. And sometimes just like gently pointing that out can help them become aware of their behavior. And like, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that offended you. Yeah, hey, when you micromanage my behaviors, it makes me feel like a child. But just kind of like, oh, hey, but you can do it in a friendly and light way also.
Yeah. And also know that, if their feelings do get hurt, that oftentimes, like you just said, everyone's coming up to the table with their own stuff. Right. So they might have gotten triggered, not necessarily because of you and what you said, but because that reminded them of something their mother said to them when they were 8. So it's like we're all children interacting with each other, right?
Absolutely. We also, the other big one that comes up is like, it's the stress of the season. I can barely enjoy it. I'm so busy, right? Blah, blah, blah. So that's a pattern, I think, that, pre-pandemic and still happening for many, including myself, is sometimes getting caught up in the day-to-day, right? And then, like, it's gone and you didn't really fully enjoy things, right? This goes back to our mindfulness. So we know it, but what would you say? What would you say would be like one good way to like make sure that people enjoy the season?
Well, I think if we just get rid of the fluff, like what we don't want to do and what we feel obligated to do, and just doing what feeds your soul. And, I realize that it can't be that everything that you do feeds your soul. Sometimes there are obligations, right? Once in a while, there are truly things you have to do, but just being very mindful and cognizant of filling your life up more with things that feed your soul, and to say no to things that drain your soul. Because I think that oftentimes people just do things out of obligation and they're drained. And then when they're drained, they have nothing to give. Your resource, your well is empty. And so you can't give from an empty well. So it's not just that you're harming yourself, but you can't really help others either if you're giving from an empty well.
Right.
So you have to fill yourself.
Yeah, it goes back to like you said, saying no, and making yourself a priority, right? And it's really like around the holiday season, almost everybody can identify at least one thing they love. Like, I love making cookies, or I love sitting there with a hot cocoa, or giving, the gifts. I would pick at least like one or two things, and hopefully you can enjoy as much as you can this year. But pick one or two things and make that like a priority in your schedule, so it doesn't get like shifted to the back. But you and I were also talking about gifts, right? And back to your obligations, that like you ever find yourself just buying a gift because you feel like you have to buy a gift? You should be buying a gift and you don't really want to be buying a gift.
Yes. And there, it's so funny, there's a few people, family members in the last couple of years that I called and I said, listen, our kids have a lot of stuff. They don't need more stuff. I have stuff. You have stuff. We don't need more stuff. Can we just not do gifts anymore? And what we did is, instead, is we have our kids make each other like a card, just like do something creative for the other person that's thoughtful. And actually, every time I've done that, the parent has said to me, thank you so much for bringing that up, because you're right. and this is a relief. So it was like everybody was thinking it, but nobody was saying it. So then I said it with the fear of hurting their feelings or coming across as like, a Grinch. But that was my intention, was just to to live it with more ease. And I think I noticed that people have appreciated that. They want to live with more ease too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to be able to do things that are genuine, is it you that always says when you give to others, you're giving to yourself as well? Gratitude is a really, maybe you didn't say it, somebody said it. But like gratitude is really good for our well-being. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for gratitude this year for ourselves, to be proud of ourselves and the ways in which we have made it through this year. I think some people have surprised themselves with their resiliency. I was like kind of chuckling when we were in the beginning of the pandemic and it was like 8-week lockdown. We were like, there is no way we'll get through this. How will we ever, right? And then we realized like our power of adaptability and strength, and especially for some people who have been going through far worse adverse experiences. But there's also a lot of room to express gratitude as a gift to others, in words, notes, or a simple gift. And I want you guys to think about that too, like 1 or 2 people this year who've really made a difference in your journey, and maybe saying, thank you to them. That might make sense and feel, different than, just buying whatever to buy it.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the takeaway lessons from this year is we have truly learned what matters, and that is quality time and what people we don't miss hanging out with, the people that we really do miss hanging out with, and just like simplifying and getting back to what really matters.
Yeah. Yep. And with that said, people are probably ready to get back to their regular program scheduling or scheduled programming on Wednesday. So thank you, people, for listening. Before we head off, Eleni, do you want to just tell them about where they can find your podcast and listen to some of the episodes? I see there's some interest in the Drama Queen episodes. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's we release it twice a month, usually on a Tuesday, and it is on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher, wherever other platforms as well. And we're releasing a new episode on December the 22nd, and we are also, as a thank you for all reviews written, all fans that post a review on iTunes from December 1st to 31st. Will be entered into a raffle to win access to 3 hypnosis sessions that are pre-recorded for weight loss that I have offered in the past. They're really great. So listen, comment, like, share, and we will announce a winner in early January.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining and sharing your wisdom. I know I am definitely looking forward to listening to more of your podcasts and hearing all the interesting stories that you're bringing. You definitely have a gift for getting people to share their vulnerability and their authentic stories, and it's interesting. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, have a good one. See you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Bye. All right, so that concludes our show for this evening. Thank you for tuning in. Just want to remind you that we have the Virginia Amos show tomorrow night at 7 p.m. She will have Megan Foran of Alexandria Company, or Alex and Company, a boutique jewelry store she'll be featuring. And then next week on ZTV, we have Living on Music, which is a very popular show on Monday evenings, and Trash or Treasure on Tuesday, which is one of my faves. And we have a special holiday, it's like a Antiques Roadshow, but it's a holiday edition. So please tune in. And as always, don't forget to be the good news in someone's life. Have a good evening.